Here is another session from the series Defense Against Dark Acts. We are focusing on developing the knowledge, awareness, and mental readiness to prepare our own protection shields against these frauds and intruders. In this session, we'll learn about how to validate an email. Let's consider a situation. Let's say you have received a mail that seems to be a pretty compelling one, and it's describing a situation where somebody is interested to invest in your uh, company or in your setup, and the investment amount is substantial, and you would want to know how legitimate the mail is, how legitimate the communication is. And this could be just one scenario, and there are several such scenarios, several such lucrative mails that are usually being received by many of us all the time. And we'll discuss the way we can look at those mails. We can evaluate the accuracy, the correctness, the validation of those mails, whether those are coming from authentic senders or those are mails that are essentially trying to trap us into a certain type of cyber fraud. The approach that we'll discuss here will be around two mail providers, gmail.com and outlook.com. And the methods described will be available only when you are accessing these mails through web browsers. The reason is mobile email client or laptop desktop client mostly don't support all the investigation methods as we're going to discuss here. So you would have to rely on the web browsers, and through web browsers you can pretty much look at those relevant methods and you can make out the legitimacy of the mails pretty easily. Now, the investigation methods that we're going to discuss here would require us to inspect the header information of the mail, the headers, the metadata that would typically be there in the message source. So how to get there? So you open the email client in the browser. So you open outlook.com in the browser, or you open gmail.com in the browser, and then you in case of outlook.com, you go to the menu and look at the view menu, and then as a submenu you will see view message source. If you click on that, it will display the header information, the metadata. uh, Pretty much similar even for gmail.com. You can go to the menu of gmail.com and click on show original, and that will display you the metadata. Even if you're using a different email providers, they would have something similar along these lines. So essentially, if you open up the email provider's website in the browser, there will be something similar that would take you to original message, the message source, the metadata, the header information, and you can pretty much use the same principle to apply the investigation methods that we'll be describing from here on. Now, we'll be discussing the investigation methods, and the methods are captured here in the form of validation criteria. So here comes criteria number one. You should first be aware that the spam folder, the junk folder that you see in your email provider's client, and you also see that there are quite a few emails that are automatically landing onto that folder. Something to be aware of is that your email provider has invested significantly to develop the technology to identify these junk messages, spam messages that they consider not trustworthy. And it's a significant investment in the technology, and it is provided to the users of these email provider services. And so when you're seeing a certain message landing onto the spam folder, you will have to treat it carefully, because those technologies have certain viable reasons because of which it has automatically identified the message suitable for spam folder. But in case you are aware that the message sender is legitimate, and if you're sure about the authenticity, you might as well, go ahead and mark it as not spam. But you need to be very careful. And this is, in fact, the first criteria that you need to focus on. If this mail has landed onto the spam folder and you're not sure about the sender, you're not sure about from where it has come from, you probably, the best judgment is to keep it there as is and not really deliberate further on it. Second criteria, you need to notice the sender's domain and the reply to domain, whether those are matching or not. You can look at these examples that are uh, captured here. So here, the from header information shows a particular domain name here, and in the reply to, it's a different domain name. So the sender domain name and the reply to domain name. So the domain name is essentially the name that comes up after this @ sign. Those domain names do not match, and that seems to be uh, a potential you know trigger of an unsafe mail. So sometimes it happens that some of these related domain names are getting considered as from domain and reply to domain. Like, for example, if one of the domains is ecommercesite.com and another one, let's say the reply to domain is different from ecommercesite.com, it has a token support.ecommercesite.com, something like that. But at least these two are related because ultimately it's all ending at ecommercesite.com domain. So support.ecommercesite.com and ecommercesite.com will be considered related. And if that is the only difference between the senders and reply to domain, we'll probably not consider those as uh, anything to flag off. Now, some of these other situations, like for example, a company's mail server is running on a public cloud infrastructure. Now, in some of these cases, the sender's domain could be a public cloud domain, like for example, amazonres.com. And the reply to domain could be a company's domain, like companydomain.com. Now, such cases should also be considered okay. So you need to look at exactly, what the differences are and whether these are falling under these exceptions or whether these are beyond these exceptions. And you need to accordingly decide how potentially unsafe, the mismatch is looking like. And of course, you won't be able to make out by just looking at one or two aspects of a mail. So, I would really encourage you to see through this whole presentation and then, try and align this whole investigation process with all the criteria that are listed here. And if you see multiple criteria getting, satisfied for a particular mail, then you definitely have valid reasons to be suspicious about it. If one or two criteria are not matching, or maybe let's say, something that is appearing to be not threatening, then it could require a manual investigation of different nature. So let's continue, looking at the other criteria, and then we'll summarize towards the end how you should look at these criteria in a holistic way. Criteria 3. So there is a concept called SPF, Sender Policy Framework. Now, this is a technology that has been developed for safeguarding emails, and it enables the sender's domain to specify how to evaluate whether the sender server is authentic or not. Now, this SPF is also one of the header informations that you can see in those message sources. Like for example, if you see this sample from Gmail, here you see SPF and a qualification of that as fail, right? So when you're looking at the message source, you will see something like these: received SPS fail, or soft fail, neutral or none, or something like SPF equals to fail or soft fail or neutral or none. So if the received SPF or SPF is fail or soft fail, then that could be something that you need to be suspicious about. Um, Now, in few rare scenarios, the sender's domain may not have implemented SPF correctly or may have implemented with some wrong configurations. In such cases, the authenticity needs to be checked using a separate criteria. But in general, if SPF is failing, the likelihood is pretty high that the legitimacy of the mail is uh, not there. It's compromised. Criteria 4 is looking at something called DKIM, Domain Keys Identified Mail. So this is another technology that also has been developed to safeguard the emails. It adds a digital signature to every outgoing message and ensures that the email hasn't been tampered with by anybody in between. So if DKIM is not passing, then there will be reasons to believe that email has been tampered with and thus it is not trustworthy. So again, if you look at the sample from gmail.com, you have this DKIM as one of the header information here, and it can show up like this fail. Or if you are accessing the message source, you could see something like this, DKIM equals to fail, something along those lines. So if it is fail or something like that, it might just mean that the message is not trustworthy. Now, again, there could be some rare scenarios where the sender's domain may not have implemented DKIM properly, and because of that, they could end up having this DKIM fail uh, tagging in the header. But if that's the case, then that needs to be inspected and evaluated in a different way. Perhaps a manual investigation will be needed. Criteria 5 is about looking at another header information called DMARC. DMARC is called Domain Message Authentication Reporting and Conformance. So this technology provides a kind of a consistent policy for email domain owners to handle messages that are validated and authenticated. So again, if this is not passing, then the likelihood is high that DMARC, the particular sender domain may not be trustworthy. However, there could be domains that have not configured DMARC. In that case, it might just not be there at all. This can show up as this may not be there at all in the header information if the sender domain has not configured DMARC. So in that case, you will probably have to consider uh, evaluating the sender's domain in a different way or through an offline manual investigation. But otherwise, if the DMARC is showing up and if it is fail, uh, unless there is a guarantee that it's a mistake done by the sender's domain owner, the likelihood is high that this mail is not trustworthy at all. Criteria 6 is checking the message ID uh, to understand the proper origin of the message. So where do you see this message ID? It is again in one of the header information. So from a sample in gmail.com, you see message ID here. And the token that comes after this @ sign, um, this is considered as the domain for message ID. And if you validate it against the from sender's domain, and if these are not matching, if these are completely unrelated, there is a chance that this is not trustworthy at all. And even in view message source, you could see the similar kind of message ID, header information from header information, and if those are not matching, not related at all, these could be completely an indication of a message not being trustworthy. So um, now, please note that if these are related somehow, like for example, the uh, you know uh, same example that we have discussed previously. ecommercesite.com and support.ecommercesite.com. These type of domains we consider as related. So those will not be should not be causing kind of raising suspicion. Um, all right. So now let's understand what is all these different criteria. If you put together, how do we see those in a summarized way? So essentially, all these observation areas are those criteria that we discussed, and you can look at the threat level, how each of these criteria, um, how threatening each of these criteria could become. And essentially, you have, I mean, if you have to investigate a particular mail, whether the particular mail is trustworthy, legitimate or not, you need to really look at all these criteria together and you need to see how many of those are not satisfying, how many of those are not passing, and then you need to be cautious to carry out an offline validation of the mail content. So if you know the sender, you might try and reach out offline by calling him up or by using another means to reach out. If you do not know the sender, if you don't have any other way to reach out to the person, you might contact an email security expert who could do an offline validation if possible to understand if the email is really legitimate or not. Uh, in general, there could be other symptoms or signs of the email not being trustworthy. And if you can do a manual analysis of that by looking at the mail content, by looking at the uh, the statements made there, the intentions that are showing up in the mail, you might just be able to make out whether the mail is legitimate or not. So if the content doesn't look too trustworthy, again, the likelihood is pretty high that email is not suitable for further processing. So that's pretty much how you could go ahead and validate an email. There are several different scams where people are targeting their victims through mails, and they're sending mails from forged domains. They're sending mails from masked domains, and all of these are essentially, to lure the person uh, to a certain type of cyber fraud situation. So if you have a way to understand the exact mechanism to validate an email, you would be able to protect yourself from getting caught into those situations. So that's about it today, and we'll come back with more recommendations and suggestions pretty soon. Keep watching.